I think it's 17 horsepower rated, but motor ratings are all variable. There's 100 different ways to rate them. This vehicle is capable of going 70 miles an hour in 4th gear. It has a 5-speed transmission. When you get the vehicle, it's locked into 2nd gear. And the Curtis controller, which is a deluxe AC controller, which is right here.
Okay.
Curtis is one of the finest controllers out there. It's wonderful because there's a handheld device which you can control 1,000 functions of the car. You want faster regenerative braking, you want slower acceleration, you want depth of pedal adjustment. The controller will do all that for you. The controller is just a fancy way of taking the 16 kilowatts of battery power, 12 8-volt batteries, 96 volts, and bringing it to the motor on a controlled basis. On most cars, the controller is a thing that goes on an electric car. You'll hear a little, that's the sound of electricity going from high voltage to low voltage. It makes a little high-pitched squeak. The charger on this car is 2 Delta Q chargers. So this car can be charged in a single outlet where the gas tank ironically is located. You can plug it into a 220 or a 110. You have 2 different cords and the same outlet that goes into the car. The car will automatically determine what the input voltage is. The only advantage of 220 over 110, the charge is in half the time. It costs, it's about a $1,000 option. This car came equipped with, basically it's 2 Delta Q chargers hooked in series, so it can handle twice the electricity, or if you plug in half as much, it'll use 1. No, you don't. This 220 charger runs on 15 amp 220, or 20 amp 220. It's a MNEAA R20 or something like that. I hooked one up in my garage. I just bought a few, stuck it in, ran traditional 20 amp cable. It runs on 220, and it's totally up to code. So it doesn't even no, it's not like a dryer outlet where you need a 40 amp outlet or a air conditioner one where you need a 50 amp outlet. This is a very small circuit breaker that go on a standard panel with standard wire. All right, here's the funny thing about charging. Charging is not linear. Charging is the upside down of a bell curve. Anyone smart enough to know what that is? What's the upside down bell curve?
Well, the bell curve normally goes like this.
Right. Right. The front, a bell curve looks like my hand here. Right. If you flip that over, in half the time, you're going to get about 66% of the charge. And 90% of the time, you're going to get discharge. In 3/4 of the time, you're going to get 90% of the charge. The last quarter gets you the last 10%. There's no memory in the batteries, so you can charge to 90% in about 2 hours with 220, full 3 hours. And a 110, it's double that, so it's 4 and 6. So in 4 hours on a 110, you can get to 90% charge of your batteries. Now ideally, your batteries will go from 100% down to 80% discharge, 20% left. So 0 on your electric car is really 20% left in your batteries. So if you go below that, you have a very high likelihood that your batteries will be toast. There's 2 ways in the world to hurt a battery. One is discharging them and letting them, storing them. You'll never get them to come back to 100%. Another way of destroying a battery is overcharging them. You basically boil the inside and they become pregnant because they're sealed batteries. And it's a telltale sign that the battery was overcharged, overheated. And the last way is if you regularly deep cycle them beyond 20%, they'll just lose their life expectancy quicker.
And what's the typical voltage of the motor requires? It varies with the speed of the motor.
The motor is regulated at 96, which is what the battery pack puts out. The motor and the battery pack are matched.
Okay, so
the controller takes the voltage from 98 to whatever it needs to make the speed go to whatever speed you want through the controller. The controller is your key to regulate the voltage.
So at very low speed, the motor can
Yes. It takes less power to go at a slow speed than it does a high speed. Now let's talk about. Well, let me put it in real simple terms for you. You have a finite amount of power in your car when you start at a full charge. The biggest deterrent for range is stopping the vehicle at a stop sign. Because you have to reaccelerate 2,400 pounds of car plus 220 pounds of passenger, or 2 passengers, 500 pounds, back to speed. Every time you stop and go, your range drops. Now this one has regenerative braking and you're recapturing some of that. Everyone know what regenerative braking is? Okay, I'm going to just explain it for those who don't want to admit it. When you put on the brakes, your motor actually turns into a generator. And by spinning the motor from the weight of the car, you generate electricity, and that electricity is sent backwards through the system and ends up in your batteries. That's what regenerative braking is. The brakes on this car will last 120,000 miles. I have $80,000 in my Highlander hybrid because the main braking force of that is regenerative braking. It's taking the motor, turning it into a generator, slowing the car down and charging the batteries. 80,000 miles of my brakes are looking brand new. I was shocked, but that's one of the benefits of having a hybrid. You got less maintenance.
It's kind of like downshifting.
Yes.
Use the brakes and
you recapture the momentum of the vehicle, that 2,800 pounds is the vehicle, going 35 miles an hour has a tremendous amount of force.
Do you notice the difference in the versus one without braking? I mean, I realize that.
I notice a difference in stopping because it is very excellent at braking. When you put the brakes on here, you instantly feel that regen hitting, and it's more effective than a friction brake because it's a direct drive connection.
like downshifting.
Downshifting is a good way of talking about it.
And then the energy that it captures to get back up to 35 or better with the motor.
That's an interesting question because at a certain point, and let's take a highway speed. My Highlander produced 200 amps of energy from 70 miles an hour down to 0 braking. And then the gauge just goes bam and pegs itself. You can't get 200 amps of energy back into these batteries in 10 seconds. So there's a limiting factor of how much energy you can put into the batteries. The rest goes off as heat. So it's not 100% efficient. It's not perpetual motion. But you use it to capture it, use it to capture it. Just like putting a windmill on the car, and spinning the windmill from the energy of driving the car through the wind, creating electricity, charging the batteries, won't give you perpetual motion. Or dragging a fifth wheel, literally an extra wheel with a generator in it, won't give you perpetual motion. A lot of people, interesting, I can't tell you how many times they said, could you do this and could you extend your range by doing X? And the other common question is, what if I put a trailer in there with a generator? I could charge the batteries with gasoline and have unlimited range. If your generator puts out 96 volts, first off, it would be possible. If your generator puts out 12 volts, it's useless. Because your battery pack is rated at 96 volts. Well, here's the thing. Anyone who's had an electric car, ask Stu, ask anyone with an electric car, have you ever been stranded? And they're going to say yes. Because you're always pushing your range, and you say, geez, I got a half a tank, I need to go to the airport and back. Okay, I'll try it. And you'll get 3 miles from home and your gauge will go, I'm dead. Here's a secret about electric cars. You pull aside the road, you park it, you listen to the radio for 10 minutes or do some phone calls. In that 10 minutes, your batteries regenerate because they cool and there's a chemical process, and you'll have a reserve tank of 2 to 3 miles. You can do that twice. And then the batteries don't do that anymore. And I've used that more than once in this vehicle, in the Miles truck, in the Zap trucks. They all have it. Anything on a battery, when you stop it, park it, and cool it, it'll regen and you'll get some more range. But you only can do it twice and then post. Now this car passes 298, 300 federal